This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to China Global Television Network. This is The World Today. I'm Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Here are your top stories. At least 45 people killed in Bulgaria bus fire. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed vows to lead a frontline combat against rebels. And nearly 500,000 healthcare workers have quit their jobs in the US since the pandemic began. We begin in Bulgaria, where at least 45 people have died in a bus fire crash. 12 children were among the victims, who were mostly tourists from North Macedonia. 7 people who jumped out of the burning bus were rushed to hospital. The accident took place on a highway about 45 kilometers west of the capital, Sofia. Authorities say the cause of the crash is still unclear. Well, CGTN's Linda Kennedy is joining us live from Budapest. Linda, what more details do we have about this tragedy so far?
Well, the situation is fluid in terms of the figures that are emerging and the identities and the nationalities of the people who were on the bus. As you say, the latest figure is 45 dead, and amongst those, very sadly, 12 children. It was thought initially that it was all North Macedonian tourists that were on the bus returning from a holiday weekend trip in Istanbul. We've just heard that there's thought to have been 1 Serbian person and 1 person of Belgian citizenship who were also on the bus, but we don't know if they are among the 45 dead or among the 7 people who were taken to hospital. It happened at 2 a.m. local time on the Struma highway, which is west of Sofia. And since then, there has been some harrowing descriptions of what were found by firefighters and some of the Bulgarian authorities that went to the scene. The Interior Minister of Bulgaria was saying that the scene was terrifying and that it would be very difficult to identify the people because, in his words, they were clustered inside and burnt to ashes. So very harrowing descriptions there. In terms of the conditions of the 7 people who jumped from the burning bus, well, the Minister for Foreign Affairs for North Macedonia, has in the last hour visited the hospital in Bulgaria where they have been taken to. So we will be hearing from him as to the latest on their conditions. And it's being described in very similar terms by the Prime Ministers of the most affected countries, Bulgaria and North Macedonia. One described it as a huge tragedy, the other described it as an enormous tragedy, and trying to find the cause will be something of national importance for both nations.
Linda Kennedy joining us there from Budapest. Thank you. Now, 6 people, including 4 children, have died in a ferry accident in eastern Sri Lanka. 11 other passengers are injured and were sent to nearby hospitals. Police say the ferry capsized due to overloading. The country's Navy has begun an immediate search and rescue mission, but some of the children who are on board are still missing. Eyewitnesses told Xinhua volunteers have gathered to help with the search. In the U.S., at least 5 people have been killed and 48 injured as a man drove his car into a parade in downtown Waukesha in Wisconsin. Police say they have the 39-year-old man in custody to be charged with 5 counts of first-degree intentional homicide. Philip Crowther has more.
The first thing that the police department here really wanted to discard as quickly as possible was that there was no link to terrorism, be it domestic or international. Of course, there were questions about this when we first heard about this case, but that is now officially discarded. We also know that this suspect acted alone, that he knew nobody in this Christmas parade either, and that this appears to have been a somewhat random act of violence, a very violent one indeed, with 5 dead, 48 injured altogether. That includes a lot of children between the ages of 3 and 16. We know from the police that there was a domestic dispute of some sort, including the suspect just before he arrived here on the scene. Those are some of the details we know about this person who has a pretty large criminal record. That includes an attempt to drive over a woman in the past, maybe similar to what happened here, to a much larger and much more tragic degree. A prayer vigil being organized just a few blocks from where this tragedy happened, where hundreds of people from this town came together to pray together and, of course, somehow try to understand exactly what happened. One that really does not have the explanation that people here would like to have to somehow understand what happened. There is no clear motive at this point.
Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says he will lead frontline combat against rebel forces. The announcement comes as the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF, rebel group, gains ground in its advance towards the capital Addis Ababa. Conflict between forces aligned with the TPLF and the Ethiopian National Defense Forces erupted a year ago in the country's northernmost Tigray region. Rebel forces have recently advanced southward, prompting Ethiopia's parliament to approve a 6-month state of emergency to contain the opposition. And we'll have comprehensive coverage of that story on Africa Live coming up shortly. Well, let's bring you more stories further afield. Around 1 in 5 healthcare workers in the United States have quit their jobs since the coronavirus pandemic began. Fox News reported the figures, citing an article from The Atlantic released on Saturday. The report uses data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, showing almost 500,000 workers have quit since February last year. Many healthcare workers explained the reason for resignation was not the virus, but their institutions' unsatisfactory handling of it. They added that they had been working under hard conditions for low pay. French Prime Minister Jean Castex has tested positive for the coronavirus. His office made the announcement on Monday as Europe continues to report the world's biggest surge in cases and deaths. German Health Minister Jens Spahn is warning the country's citizens by the end of the winter they'll be vaccinated, cured or dead. The US is issuing a do not travel warning for Germany and Denmark. Austria on Monday became the first nation in Western Europe to reimpose a full nationwide lockdown. Johannes Plechberger reports from Vienna.
As of midnight, Austria's roughly 9 million people are not allowed to leave home except to go to work, shop for essentials and exercise. Just as the festive season begins, Christmas markets have to close again. The nationwide lockdown is supposed to last 20 days, after which it is expected to continue for the unvaccinated. The decision has caused a fierce backlash, with more than 40,000 taking to the streets last weekend. Having a vaccination rate of 66%, Austria has said it will introduce a vaccine mandate before February the 1st, joining the Vatican as the only places in Europe with such a requirement.
I think the mandatory vaccination is a really best way to get all the people for vaccination. We see more people coming for the first and the second.
Although an obligatory vaccination could be seen as encroaching on fundamental individual rights, several legal experts say it would be justifiable if it were the last option available to stop the pandemic.
From a legal point of view, there are no insurmountable hurdles for the introduction of compulsory vaccination in Europe.
Although details of the mandatory vaccination requirement have not been released yet, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. Fines for the non-vaccinated will most likely be between $1,000 and $4,000. Johannes Plechberger, CGTN, Vienna.
In most of Europe, COVID has never been this bad. In Greece, where authorities have been ensuring that only the vaccinated, those with negative results, and ones recovered from the virus were allowed to use public spaces, on Monday dramatically new measures went into effect until December 6th. The main target, unvaccinated people.
From next Monday, all adult unvaccinated citizens, in addition to catering, will not enter other indoor areas, not even if they carry negative test results.
The latest measures that kicked in on Monday allows only fully vaccinated people or those recovered from COVID in the last 6 months into public indoor venues such as cinemas, theaters, museums, and gyms after presenting proof and logging in on a government website. Some argue that the latest measures are divisive and unfair.
I really don't feel like showing my ID to anyone, especially when that has to do with my information that's private. It's ridiculous, just ridiculous. And the government is trying to convince me by going on every single news channel of the country.
So far, the country has had 17,000 deaths and close to 900,000 confirmed cases, double of what it had just a few months ago. So in addition to the measures of who can enter where, it also includes staggered working hours for those working both in public and private sectors to avoid overcrowding during rush hours and on public transport. With authorities increasing patrols and checks, business owners are pleading for people to get vaccinated.
Maybe we will stay open until Christmas, and after, for 2 months and more, we will close again. Because this is the system right now, not only in Europe, but in all the world. All the world now suffering with the COVID. The people don't go vaccinate themselves, and it's a big problem.
As Greece falls behind other European nations with only 61% of the population fully vaccinated, public health experts are calling on the people to get the jab. Evangelos Sipsas for CGTN, Athens.
A cold wave and heavy snow continued on Monday in northeast China. Schools have been closed and traffic impacted in some cities in Heilongjiang, Jilin and Liaoning provinces. Earlier, we spoke to our reporter Yu Yang in Heilongjiang's capital, Harbin.
As you can see, most of the roads and the cars behind me have already covered by snow. Well, I'll show you how thick the snow is. Well, actually, this road has already been cleaned by sanitary workers. As you can see, you can still find some piles of snow right behind me. And these piles of snow is around 20 to 30 centimeters high. But, well, that's not compared with what in Jiangsu city in northeast region in Heilongjiang, because the snow there is already reached 42 centimeters. Well, actually, authorities here are urging people to stay indoors because extreme weather and primary schools and high schools are already closed. At the same time, kindergartens and training centers have already suspended their daily operations. Actually, authorities in Harbin have issued a second-level emergency response in the city in regard to the disaster, and that means construction sites as well as the tourist attractions here have already temporarily closed. At the same time, the freight transport vehicles have already been suspended unless for emergency use. Well, always the authorities have issued departments such as water and heating as well as the water supplies to ensure their daily operations to make sure people stay alive here. And at the same time, the agriculture as well as the rural departments say they're taking necessary measures to ensure they guarantee the crops as well as the home breeding animals here in Harbin.
And that's it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Thanks for watching.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed vows to lead frontline combat against the rebels. Floods across South Sudan's unity state leave a trail of devastation. And experts warn South Africans to brace for a fourth COVID-19 wave in December. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also ahead on the program. In business news, South African Airways to stop its daily return flights from between Johannesburg and Mozambique's capital, Maputo. And in sports, Tanzania's amputee football team ready for the Africa Cup of Nations in Dar es Salaam. And let's begin in Ethiopia, where Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says he'll lead a frontline combat against rebel forces. The announcement comes as the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or the TPLF rebel group, gains ground in its advance towards the capital, Addis Ababa. Conflict between forces aligned with the TPLF and the Ethiopian National Defense Forces erupted over a year ago in the country's northernmost Tigray region. Rebel forces have recently advanced southward, prompting Ethiopia's parliament to approve a 6-month state of emergency to contain the opposition. Well, let's go to Uganda, where authorities say 7 suspects linked to last week's suicide bombings in Kampala have been killed. The twin bombings killed 7 people and injured dozens. ISIL claimed responsibility for the attack. The group is allied with the ADF, which has launched attacks in DRC and Uganda. Security services also say 106 people have been detained during their operations. No details have been provided on how the 7 suspects were killed. The police spokesperson, Fred Inanga, says the operations are aimed at disrupting and dismantling acts of domestic terrorism. And staying in East Africa, South Sudan continues to deal with devastating floods. Residents of Unity State have been hard hit by months of flooding. Ashtatal has more.
South Sudan's Unity State is experiencing devastating floods. Residents have had to flee as their homes have been swept away.
We are facing devastating floods. Everybody is worried about it. We don't know how it will improve because we are not safe. We could be in a dry place today, and tomorrow we will be submerged in water. As women, it is very difficult for us. We have no access to firewood or charcoal. We have no access to anything. We are depending on humanitarian aid.
The UN mission in South Sudan has partnered with state authorities and humanitarian partners to mount an emergency response.
In cooperation with our country team members and the governor, UNMISS and our partners have been working hard to maintain continuity of our roadways for the community, but also keeping the water away from new areas where communities have to move to and settle.
Beyond providing support for IDPs, water hygiene and safety have emerged as key issues.
Now what we've done is that on each side we put the dikes to prevent water from going into the road. The main purpose of working in this particular portion is to ensure that the access to the dumping site where we dump solid waste and where we put sewage is opened up so that we can get the sewage and the solid waste both from the UNMISS camp, humanitarians, and then also from the IDP.
South Sudan has been hit by the worst flooding in decades, with the UNHCR estimating that at least 700,000 people have been impacted. Astatal, CGTN.
Well, let's return to our headline story, where Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says he'd lead from the frontline combat against rebel forces. Well, let's get more now from Girum Chala. He's in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, for us. Good to see you there, Girum. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says he will join the frontline from today. What's the latest? What can you tell us?
Beatrice, about 15 hours ago, that announcement was made by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed on his
official Facebook page. He said, you've said, he is now determined to win this war alongside his national defense, the National Defense Force, and those people, citizens of this country, who will be joining him. So from today onwards, he said he will be in the front line fighting and leading the Ethiopian National Defense Force against the TPLF rebel group. So we can report that war has continued. It has intensified. Reports are coming out of perhaps Ethiopian National Defense Force gaining some kind of ground in the battlefields in the northern Amhara regional state, more particularly, and also in the Afar regional state. TPLF forces are also said to continue fighting, and they have announced that they will be advancing to the capital Addis Ababa, and there is no power that can stop them, according to the statement they have released. So the Prime Minister has joined the war, and now it has taken a new turn, according to experts. Whether that's going to help Ethiopia achieve what it wants or not, we shall see. But this is also happening against the attempt of the African Union to broker peace, which we don't know whether it's going to succeed or not for now.
Girum, the war began in the Tigray region before spreading to Afar and Amhara regions. Which of these areas is currently regarded as the front line?
Beatrice, as you said, the war started about a year ago in the Tigray regional state for what the government called a law enforcement mission against the TPLF, which went rogue against the constitutional order of the country. After that, and still now, the war has continued. It has intensified, as you've said, to Afar and Amhara regional states. Now what we know is the TPLF force have advanced. They are in fact a few hundred kilometers away from the capital Addis Ababa at the moment, according to reports, and then gaining ground. There is a serious war happening at the moment, about 250 or 270 kilometers away from the capital Addis Ababa, on the main highway from the Amhara regional state to the capital city itself. So what we know is about 250 kilometers away from here, southern part of the Amhara regional state is the first front line we know. And also the Afar regional state is a very strategic location. As you know, it's also one way that TPLF has been attempting to break so that it can control the roads which are leading from the port of Djibouti to the capital city or to the rest of the country at the same time. So the Afar regional state, most of its locations are frontline at the moment, but there we know that the report is saying that the National Defense Force have stronger control of most of the areas, and also the Afar force there. So TPLF is still pushing, but then again the National Defense Force are reportedly also repelling some of the attacks that are being waged against it at the moment, Beatrice.
Is to go to the front line, and as you mentioned, this now takes the war to a new turn. How are people reacting there to Prime Minister Abiy's statement? Also, are there any reactions from the rebels?
Well, people here seem to be very much determined to join the Prime Minister. As I was saying earlier, even celebrities from athletes to singers and former army generals are now joining and calling answering Prime Minister's call to join his mission of leading the Ethiopian National Defense Force from the battlefield itself. The reaction seems to be overwhelming. Hundreds and thousands are still being enlisted in the Ethiopian National Defense Force. But this announcement, Beatrice, by the way, is a historic announcement by itself, as the Prime Minister, the leading person on top of the government, is now going to be, or is in the battlefield himself. And so many people, as per his call, seem to be following. From the TPLF side, there is a statement, more particularly from Getachew Reda. He's a spokesperson and of the TPLF itself. He said that the move by the Prime Minister, according to him, is ridiculous, and this will not stop them from marching and advancing to the capital city, Addis Ababa. So in general terms, at the moment, the reaction from the public seems to be like this, but TPLF seems to be also saying that they are determined to finish what they called a job of removing the Prime Minister from office.
All right, Girum Chala joining us there from Addis Ababa. Thank you. German NGO Sea-Watch says it has rescued about 107 migrants in the central Mediterranean. Among the rescued people is a 31-year-old woman with a newborn child. The migrants were reportedly packed in a small wooden boat sailing in precarious conditions. The NGO says it is waiting for a safe port to disembark. A total of over 480 migrants recently rescued from boats in difficulty in the Mediterranean Sea in different operations. South Africa will likely be hit by a fourth wave of infections in December, but the impact might not be as severe as during earlier surges. That's according to health experts there. South Africa has the highest number of coronavirus cases on the continent. CGTN's Elisa Njamela has more.
Scientists working with the government have predicted that a fourth wave of coronavirus infections could hit South Africa mid-December at the earliest, heading towards early January.
What we do is we work on predictions and looking back to try and get an idea of what's happening forward. So we know a number of things. One is there will be a fourth wave. We know that the intervals between these waves are not exactly the same, but they come with relative frequency. So you get a short respite of about 3 or 4 weeks, and then the next wave arrives.
The health ministry says the next wave will likely be less severe than previous resurgences because about a third of South African adults are fully vaccinated, and between 60% and 70% of the population may have already been infected. South Africa's 40% vaccination rate among the adult population is also expected to provide protection, but vaccine hesitancy remains a concern.
It's an interesting dynamic. In the beginning, we were chasing older people and specifically males because the numbers were lower. Right now, as a percentage of the total number of males in the category over 50, men are more vaccinated than women. So the catch-up has been very good amongst older men. In the younger categories, so people under the age of 40 are extremely poorly vaccinated compared with the older people.
Even though the COVID-19 cases are once again increasing, South Africa is in a much better place than in the last 16 months at least. The country has managed to move from a high of 20,000 new cases in July to just about 700 presently. But Dr. Crisp warns that this might just be a ruse.
So what tends to happen is that the virus burns itself out, and the speed at which it will burn itself out of a wave depends on how many of us are vaccinated and how much immunity is in the community that is being exposed to the virus. So if we suddenly start exposing people who have never been exposed to the virus or have only been done in passing to the virus in communities now, we will create the next wave. You know, all waves go up, they reach a peak and they come down again. Don't have any false illusions. It's up to 700 again at the moment in a day, and it's a cluster in Tshwane in the Gauteng area, and that may well be the start of something. So don't get too excited when the numbers come down. That's just what they do.
Since South Africa launched the vaccination program, more than 23 million people have received at least one dose, and close to 13 million people are fully vaccinated. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Nigeria has started a COVID-19 vaccination campaign to cover 50% of its eligible population by January 2022. It is part of the government's push to scale up vaccination efforts towards achieving its herd immunity target. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reports.
Remember, no one is protected and safe until we are all protected and safe.
A key message to Nigerians from the Secretary to the government, Boss Mustafa, as he kick-started the countrywide COVID-19 inoculation drive. It's the latest in Nigeria's move towards increasing the number of vaccinated citizens by making vaccines more accessible.
Through this mass COVID vaccination campaign initiative, arrangements have been made to ease all known bottlenecks to access, because the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency has expanded vaccination sites. These sites include public health facilities, private health facilities, mobile vaccination posts, and mass vaccination sites such as schools, markets, shopping malls, recreation centers, motor parks, worship houses, and other public places that attract.
Only around 3.3 million eligible Nigerians have been fully vaccinated, representing 2.9% of the total population expected to receive the shots. To achieve herd immunity, authorities say that over 111 million people would need to be inoculated. Despite the increase in supply of COVID-19 jabs, vaccine hesitancy still remains a major challenge.
We are concerned that there are Nigerians who continue to be hesitant, despite the federal government fulfilling its commitment to providing COVID-19 vaccines free of charge to all Nigerians.
In the meantime, health authorities continue to reassure citizens that all quality control checks and safety protocols are observed in the administration of the COVID-19 jabs.
The federal government is committed to providing safe and efficacious COVID-19 vaccines and dispensing them backed with accountability and transparency. All vaccines are tagged and tracked by NAFDAC to ensure that quality and potency is maintained in the supply chain.
The government hopes to use the mass vaccination campaign to quickly increase the number of fully vaccinated people in the country. Not only will it move Nigeria towards achieving herd immunity, it's also expected to help fast-track social and economic recovery. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. Ethiopia gets back artifacts looted by British soldiers more than 150 years ago. The 9th batch of a Chinese medical team in South Sudan has begun an outreach program to treat vulnerable people who may not be able to reach hospitals in the country. The team has begun providing monthly medical services to vulnerable groups such as orphans. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
The Chinese medical team in South Sudan is taking treatment to those who need it. They have been visiting groups such as orphans and providing free general medical checkups. The team also donates items such as milk, biscuits, volleyballs and football to the children, and it is promising to do more.
We are now 2 months here. We have seen the challenges in the health sector in the country. We will give feedback to our government in China, and then the government will see how it can provide more help.
Since 2011, China has been sending a new team of medical personnel to South Sudan each year. The team provides on-the-job training for South Sudan's healthcare workers. The Chinese medical team currently in South Sudan is the 9th batch. The team now says it plans to occasionally hold medical camps for vulnerable groups such as orphans, elderly, and even the street children. The Chinese medical team says it wants to conduct extensive checkups, including doing follow-ups on the children.
They actually bring for us a lot of expensive drugs. So, drugs that at the pharmacy we would not be able to afford. So when we are running out of the essential medicines like cough syrup, malaria tablets or stuff like that, we ring them that we are running out, and then they usually bring for us. They are very, very friendly people.
In the past, the management of this orphanage used to spend $1,500 monthly on health care for orphans in this facility, but with the presence of a Chinese medical team, that money is now used to buy shoes, books and clothes. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
China's President Xi Jinping has delivered a speech to commemorate the 30th anniversary of China-ASEAN dialogue relations. Former Trade Secretary for the Zambian High Commission in London, Anthony Mumba, followed President Xi's speech closely. Mumba has applauded China's efforts in trying to build partnerships to support regional growth in Asia. Mumba is urging African nations as well as Zambia to foster partnerships with China. He believes this move will allow the continent to benefit from such relations.
He's proposing that they'll support vaccines. They will ensure that they also provide some funds, to the tune of almost $1.5 billion to try and make sure that the region remains safe. And this will benefit trade, this will benefit regional growth, which is the main reason why this relationship is there. So I think that China is on the right path in as far as trying to lift all these economies out of recession and out of poverty. And it's the same thing that here in Zambia we can also tap in, because if we are able to ensure that we strengthen our relationship with China, which already seems to have a clear idea and plan in as far as how it deals with countries it's cooperating with, I think that Zambia stands to benefit.
13 looted cultural artifacts have been returned to Ethiopia. They were returned from the UK following months of negotiations. The artifacts were taken after a battle between the Ethiopian and British empires a century and a half ago. Ethiopia's ambassador to the UK welcomed their return, but mentioned the country remains in negotiations with the British Museum. It is looking for the return of 12 tablets, which are considered sacred to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. South Africa now, where invasive trees are being cut down in Cape Town so as to protect the city's water reservoirs. The trees utilize more water than native species. That's why in 2018, when the city was faced with the danger of running out of water due to a prolonged drought, it put a plan in place to tackle their invasive problem. Now Cape Town is finally saving billions of litres of water as a result of this intervention. Here is CGTN's Travis Andrews.
The Greater Cape Town Water Fund was established to tackle a growing problem, that of invasive and thirsty tree species that were competing with indigenous ones for the city's water resources. The fund, which has a lifespan of 30 years, was tasked with tackling invaders such as pine trees, which have deep roots and thus consume a lot of water. Now the pine trees, along with other invasive species, are being cleared to reduce the pressure they put on the city's water reservoirs.
We've cleared 20,000 hectares, and we calculated, although it's still early days, but we calculated that by clearing the 20,000 hectares, we have reclaimed the water losses of 9 billion litres. And as we maintain those areas clear of invasive trees, the water benefits will be for every year.
The fund is aiming to clear around 54,500 hectares in the first 6 years, and some of the work is concentrated around the city's dams. Climate change and invasive trees pose a real danger to Cape Town, and the threat of day zero is still fresh in many people's minds.
Climate change is with us, and we experienced the effect of climate change in a very harsh way in 2018, when Cape Town almost ran out of water. And by clearing the invasive trees in the catchments, restoring the catchments, we can reclaim 2 months' water for Cape Town.
That is expected to ward off any potential day zero scenario again by a further 2 months, and is part of Cape Town's broader water plan.
The city of Cape Town, who's the biggest water user, using 61% of the water in the system, contributed $4.3 million over 3 years. And this is the first municipality in South Africa that's investing in water security outside its boundaries.
The removal of the invasive trees has been a challenging process, because some of it is located high up in the mountains, where the crews have to camp for up to 2 weeks at a time while on a clearing mission. These clearing missions are considered to be so crucial in mitigating the combined effects of climate change and the presence of invasive trees that plans are underway to expand the program to the broader Western Cape region. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Egypt's tourism ministry has launched a website of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, which was built in 1902. It was the first building ever constructed to house a museum in the country, as before that, palaces were converted to serve that purpose. CGTN's Yasser Hakim has more about the website and Egypt's efforts to promote its tourism online.
The new website marks the 119th anniversary of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. With over 150,000 pieces, it's the largest of its kind to be dedicated to one civilization. The team that created the website were led by Khaled Sharif, who says it's meant to reach out to those who are fascinated by the ancient Egyptian civilization.
The site provides an overall idea about the museum collections in the artifacts. There is a number of photos that has been taken for the masterpieces at the museum. It also provides an idea about the history of the museum building itself. The site also capitalized on technology in providing the ability to buy online tickets. So today, through the site of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo.
The website is the culmination of a digital transformation strategy by the government, which the tourism industry is optimizing to advertise the country's attractive destinations.
During 2020, the peak of the lockdown, we started introducing the virtual tourism as a concept, and there were a number of 360 movies and 3D images, high-resolution images that were introduced over the lockdown period. Let's always keep in mind that the lockdown period made people forget about how beautiful some destinations are. So that's where the campaigns came quite useful. They reminded the tourists outside Egypt with the beauty of spending some time in Egypt.
Tourism is one of the main sources of hard currency for the North African country. It's slowly recovering after being hit hard due to global travel restrictions after the breakout of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020.
We're having positive reactions from all markets these days. Still, 2010 is the winning year so far. It was 14 million visitors came to Egypt, mostly 80% to Sinai and the Red Sea. Of course, 2019, we reached around 12 millions. So far, after the COVID and the pandemic, things became decreased definitely, and it went to 3.5 million. But I think we are going to reach the 7 or 8 million by the end of this year.
And experts believe the aggressive online marketing is timely.
For sure, we are expecting a very positive results from everyone who uses the smartphones around the world, who can access those mobile applications made by Egyptians for the sites. And we're expecting more and more online bookings. Over and above, Ministry of Tourism have established a link, a hyperlink that can allow everyone to access it. And this link can send WhatsApp messages and SMSs to all the clients, informing them about the updates, what is going on in the market. And this is quite an advantage for the tourism these days. Everything is becoming e-tourism.
Another popular online engine is the virtual tour inside the Great Pyramids of Giza. And the government is also planning a similar virtual tour of the Grand Egyptian Museum once it's inaugurated in early 2022. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, let's now take a look at your business news. Here's what's ahead. South African Airways to stop its daily flights between Johannesburg and Mozambique's capital, Maputo.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
South African Airways says that it is stopping its daily return flight between Johannesburg and Mozambique's capital, Maputo, from December the 1st. South African SAA has cited poor performance as the reason for ending the flight. The new measure is seen as part of a national carrier strategy to return to profitability. SAA returned to the skies in late September after being grounded for almost 18 months and following a bitter business rescue process. The Lena airline resumed operations with 7 destinations, including only a single domestic route between Johannesburg and Cape Town. SAA has slowly been expanding its reach to other parts of the continent, including Mauritius. The airline says that plans are underway to resume flights to Lagos, Nigeria by mid-December, just in time for the festive season. Libya has announced plans to construct a solar plant with Total Energies. The country's Ministry of Oil and Gas, Mohamed Aoun, announced the plans on Monday. He was speaking at the launch of the 2021 Libya Energy and Economy Summit. The North African country is heavily reliant on oil. OPEC estimates the sector represents 69% of Libya's foreign export earnings. In addition to working with Total to build a solar plant, Aoun announced plans to increase Libya's oil production.
The agreement that was signed today is the agreement of Total Energies, which submitted a proposal to establish a 500 megawatt solar power plant on the basis that construction will be completed and its costs will be paid over a period of 25 years.
South Africa's economic recovery and development strategy, launched by President Ramaphosa 12 months ago, may not be the optimal approach to the country's recovery, according to a new report prepared by a think tank. Angelo Coppola has the story.
The report, prepared by the Centre for Development and Enterprise, suggests that localization, one of the pillars of the new policy as an approach to industrialization and development, won't achieve its goals.
We see this as an anti-export strategy and a strategy that will not increase South Africa's competitiveness as an economy, nor will it increase our competition within the economy. So we think this is the wrong priority and it's a misguided policy.
The country faces several challenges, the biggest being its 12 million unemployed people. Bernstein says this policy is misguided.
It seems attractive to say we want to encourage government to spend money on domestic firms and we'll hold on to the jobs that we have. But we think this is short-sighted, that it fails to appreciate there will be some firms that benefit from this policy, but it fails to appreciate the costs to government, to the economy as a whole, to consumers, and to our competitiveness.
Part of South Africa's challenge is its distance from all major developed markets, but there's a potential solution closer to hand.
You have a plus 50 country policy program called the African Continental Free Trade Agreement in place, which is trying to promote exactly this. And this would be a first step in the direction then of policy coordination. How would our industrial policy correspond with regional policy? And the African Continental Free Trade Agreement gives some big clues on that.
Another aspect that hasn't been sufficiently investigated in this industrial policy is the skills requirement to make the policy work.
Are they available? Can they be imported? Here, South Africa needs to look to its scarce skills, immigration policies. There is a squaring up to that, but I would venture not broad enough and not quick enough.
The Centre for Development and Enterprise is calling for focus on certain key issues.
So get the environment right, fix the labour market regulations, not wholesale, but carefully calibrated reforms, fix our education and skills system. So these are much higher priorities in our view.
South Africa's economic growth rate is languishing at the moment, and government policy needs to change and change quickly in order to take advantage of any opportunities. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Tanzania's amputee football team ready for the Africa Cup of Nations in Dar es Salaam.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference. How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Tanzania's national amputee football team says it is preparing for the African Cup of Nations for Amputee Football, also known as CANAF 2021, to be held in the country's commercial capital, Dar es Salaam, on the 25th of November. Tanzania will face 13 other African nations, including defending champions Angola. Here is CGTN's Daniel Kijo with more.
Yuma Kidevu won't let his disability stop him from reaching his dreams of being a top professional footballer. He's the team captain of Tanzania's national amputee team, Tembo Warriors. They will battle it out with other teams from the continent to take part in the 2022 Amputee Football World Cup to be held in Turkey. But he says, despite these big dreams, they need more support.
We want the society to know about this game. They shouldn't stay away and just ask how these guys play. They should come and see for themselves and see how it differs from normal football, because we're all representing the country.
African Cup of Nations for Amputee Football is a competition for African amputee footballers which is held every 2 years with the aim of expanding the visibility and rights of people with disabilities. The team's assistant coach Hassan Mageda says they intend to not only qualify for the World Cup in Turkey next year, but as hosts, winning the African Cup of Nations for amputee football competition.
Tanzania has the opportunity to make it all the way to the World Cup because we have prepared the team well. The team is calm and makes calculated moves. We have prepared our players to be psychologically strong. They know how to make strategic passes. We built them to make movements that will lead the team to win this competition.
Shafi Dauda is one of Tanzania's top sports analysts and football entrepreneurs who has been following the team since it was founded in 2019. As a support of the team, he says financial support is needed.
We played a match with them and they defeated us by 6 goals, but the Bulls were in terrible shape. This was a challenge I saw firsthand, so I am giving them balls to train with immediately so they can continue preparing for the African Cup of Nations.
Despite minimal public support, Tembo Warriors had already won some significant tournaments, including 4 local tournaments, as well as making it to the semi-finals of the 2019 Cup of African Nations for Amputee Football held in Angola. Tembo means elephant in Swahili. The Tembo Warriors say, much like the name of the animal that inspired the team's name, they aim to trample the opposition and win the tournament. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Manchester United's caretaker manager Michael Carrick led training since Monday, just 24 hours after manager Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was sacked as head coach. Carrick, who has been placed in temporary charge while United are still searching for a permanent replacement. The Englishman, who played 316 times for United, joined the coaching staff after retiring in 2018. Carrick will take charge of United's Champions League challenge match on Tuesday night when they travel to Spain to face Villarreal. United, currently top Group F, but with the same points as Villarreal, heading them by virtue of winning their first match 2-1.